Hey, this is Neil on Dynasty. Please like, share, and subscribe. Buy some silver, some platinum. Don't listen to me. Everything I or we say is taken as bull crap. And this is for fun, not for profit or for health. Hot diggity dag nab, got all the banners out of the way. How's everyone doing this evening? All right, let's see here. Let's go with the story. Share screen. Let's see. Okay, this is going to be boring as hell, but it is what it is. It has to do with work and the amount of work coming up. It has to do with maritime shipping. It has to do with our fleet, our secondary fleet. Hey, what's up, Pablo and Silver? And why Trump did an executive order for Shipbuilding Act and why there's fixing to be a ton of work. And it's working through politics right now, but basically this is about a little 18-minute thing, gives an
budget
explanation.
wish list, and in the $292.8 billion request, they're going big on new ships, like triple what they asked for last year. But there are still numerous roadblocks to making this plan a reality. Funding hurdles, shipyard capacity, workforce shortages, and political horse trading could all derail the service's most ambitious and necessary shipbuilding surge in years. Today, we are breaking down what the Navy's asking for in FY 2026, how it fits into the long-term strategy to maintain its dominance of the seas, and whether the fleet the U.S. says it needs is one that it can actually deliver. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to Odoo for sponsoring today's episode. If you're still juggling spreadsheets, sticky notes, handle the rest. In FY 2024, the Navy asked Congress to fund 9 new ships. In FY 2025, that number dropped to just 6. This year, they want 19. For those of you who don't math good, that's more than triple last year's request and double the year before that. The ask includes a mix of attack submarines, destroyers, amphibious ships, logistics vessels, and a new class of medium landing ships for the Marine Corps. It's one of the most aggressive expansion attempts in recent memory. Now, got a bit of a caveat there because only 3 of those ships are in the Navy's base or their discretionary budget. The other 16 rely on a separate pool of money called mandatory or reconciliation funding, and that is not a guarantee. This funding would require not just congressional approval, but also signature from the president. In this case, that's Donald Trump, who issued an executive order in April of 2025 titled Restoring America's Maritime Dominance. In it, he called for a revitalized shipbuilding industry and directed federal agencies to reduce red tape and strengthen the maritime industrial base. His Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, echoed that sentiment during his confirmation hearing, saying, "If we're serious about deterring conflict, we need to get serious about building ships. That means reforming acquisition, stabilizing demand signals, and investing in the yards and people who make this possible." But saying it is one thing, funding it is an entirely other thing.
Tariffs will fund it this nicely.
First, let's talk about where this money is supposed to come from. Discretionary spending is part of the defense budget that Congress approves each year. It's the kind of funding we usually see debated in public hearings and appropriations bills. Mandatory funding, on the other hand, is usually reserved for things like Social Security, Medicare, or military pensions, for example. But in this case, it's being used as a workaround to pump more cash into the Navy's shipbuilding plan without running afoul of the spending caps imposed by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. In FY 2026, the Navy is asking for $292.8 billion total, but only $248.9 billion is in the base budget. The other $43.3 billion, nearly 15% of the total, is part of this mandatory request. And that money covers a lot more than just ships. It's also supposed to fund critical upgrades to shipyards, the munitions industrial base, like missiles and interceptors, things that we covered before because we're kind of running low on them, and even tuition assistance programs for sailors and Marines, which is an important benefit or incentive for retention and recruiting. And we'll get more into why recruiting is a big deal in just a little bit. This kind of two-track budgeting highlights a deeper truth about how the U.S. funds its military. A lot of it isn't stable. Even core priorities like shipbuilding increasingly rely on supplemental or workaround funding. And long-term planning a lot harder, especially when you're trying to build a fleet. So here's what the Navy says it wants to buy in FY 2026. 1 Columbia-class missile submarine, 2 Virginia-class attack submarines, 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, 1 America-class amphibious assault ship, 1 San Antonio-class amphibious transport dock, 9 medium landing ships, 2 John Lewis-class oilers, and 1 Tagus ocean surveillance ship. Let's break those down to get a better idea of what they're buying and kind of why. First, let's talk about the Columbia-class submarine, which is perhaps the most important ship in the Navy's entire portfolio, depending on who you ask. The Columbia replaces the aging Ohio-class and forms the sea-based leg of the U.S. nuclear triad. These boats are designed to be ultra-stealthy, highly survivable, and are capable of carrying 16 Trident II D5 ballistic missiles. But at $132 billion for a 12-ship class, Columbia is also the most expensive shipbuilding program in U.S. history, beating the Ford-class supercarriers by $12 billion overall. And you're going to hear this a lot, it's already running behind schedule.
Should President Trump remove Pride Month and replace it with Veterans Month? We believe the people who spent risking...
The other sub they're buying is the Virginia class, which is the Navy's workhorse fast attack submarine. Great at tracking enemy subs, gathering intel, launching Tomahawk strikes, and quietly showing up where they're least expected.
All right, enough about that. I didn't want to go too far into that without saying this card right here is the card you need. Next year, if you have this card, you'll be able to walk into one of those shipbuilding yards and get a job right off the bat, and you won't have to wait 3 months to get that card. That's the TWIC card. It's a background check, gives you access to sensitive infrastructure for military infrastructure, which is shipbuilding. Shipbuilding is a very, very important thing coming up. So as you know, China's supposedly getting ahead of us, and that's all well and good. But this is Blondie. What's up, Blondie? But we're going to catch up, and there's going to be a lot of ships and subs. 26, good 10, 15 years worth of work coming up. Just figured I'd let y'all know. I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. Yeah, let's see the kitty cat a little bit. Oh, bye-bye, kitty cat. Yep, you step on the desk, you go down to the ground. All right, now we're going to do another ship thingamajigger to validate the fact that ships will be built here in America. And this is what's going on with shipping. Sal Macagliano. Ship registries closing to dark or shadow fleets from Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. Pretty much that means we can't be buying other people's ships and putting them into our fleet. We have to build them. And this guy's going to explain it.
Going on with shipping, ship registries are closing themselves off from the dark fleet. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, a subject we talk about here a lot is the dark fleet. This is the ghost fleet, the shadow fleet, or the parallel fleet. This is the fleet of vessels that are carrying Russian, Iranian, Venezuelan oil that is under sanctions by a variety of different entities out among the world. But we just had a news story come out from G-Captain about Panama closing themselves off. We're going to take a look at that, discuss it in some more detail, and let you know what this means to you. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's the story over at GCAP. Mike Schuller. Panama closes registry to older oil tankers and bulkers amid the shadow fleet concerns. Panama Ship Registry will no longer accept the registration of oil tankers or bulk carriers that are more than 15 years old. These are vessels from the so-called ghost or shadow fleet. So what do we mean by the ghost or shadow fleet? Well, basically what we're discussing here is ships that are carrying oil that are under sanctions from the G7, the EU, a variety of different entities. And more importantly, in the case of Russia, since February of 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, there has been a prohibition on the hauling of Russian oil and diesel over a set price, what's known as the price cap. $60 for oil, $100 for diesel, although that recently changed. Now we're on this kind of a flexible system that's 15% below the standard cost of oil out there. I don't even know how they're going to enforce that. But the mechanism that the G7, the EU, and all these other countries were using was insurance. They basically got the 12 big P&I, protection and indemnity clubs out there in the world to sit there and say, hey, don't insure ships carrying Russian oil or diesel if they're over the price cap. And that should work, except for one thing. The Russians have seen how sanction invasion has been going on in the past. Venezuela, Iran have been doing this. And what they did is they got other ships to carry it. Initially, they would find companies, insurance companies out there that would insure them beyond the 12 P&I clubs. Well, when they couldn't get ships to be registered under the big registries out there, they went and found some new registries, or in some cases, just created new registries. And the ships are not pulling into ports to be inspected under what's called port state control. This is the requirement set up by the International Maritime Organization that nations can inspect vessels of other nations to ensure they're meeting minimum standards of sailing. And what you basically have now are ships sailing out in the world's oceans. They're rendezvousing with ships at anchorages off Spain, Greece, and Malaysia, doing ship-to-ship transfers. And these ships have no registry. There's no country that's registering them. Or if they do have a registry, it's a fake or very minimally managed registry. There may be insurance or no insurance whatsoever. There's no classification society overseeing them because that's what the insurance usually requires. And you have the danger of ships sailing on the world's oceans that can be massive environmental time bombs waiting to happen. So let's take a look at this and discuss it in a little more detail here. This is a little more of the story from Mike Schuller. According to the Panama Maritime Authority, this is the registry for Panama, these shadow fleets primarily consist of aged oil tankers with OPEC ownership structures that are often underinsured and employ unsafe practices to circumvent international sanctions. The decision follows an analysis of inspection data showing that 71% of fleet arrests between 2023 and the first half of 2025 involve bulk carriers, general cargo vessels, and oil tankers over 15 years old. Panama has the trifecta of all maritime things. They are probably one of the major players out there in the world. What do I mean? Well, you have Arsenio Dominguez here on the right. He is the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization. Panama is the second largest register of ships in the world, 8,810 flagships, 241.1 million gross registered tons, according to the Panamanian Registry. And the Panama Canal.
So wait, what's the catch? That's what most people ask when they hear about California's new RSSE solar incentive.
Solar incentives, yeah, right.
Which has defied drought issues last year, recorded its best year ever with $3.45 in revenue. That's a 9.5% increase over last year. So again, the trifecta, one of the largest ship registries, Secretary General of the IMO, and the Panama Canal, which is hitting record numbers there. All of that is leading to Panama sitting there saying, hey, we're not going to register vessels over 15 years of age. Now, I actually think there's something else going on behind the scenes. I'm going to share that with you at the end. But this is a major thing. Now, I do have an issue with the story. Other states have been doing this, and particularly the largest registry in the world, Liberia. This story from the Liberian registry, their CEO, Alfonso Castellero, announces the launch of RISC, a new tool to strengthen maritime compliance. Now, this is back in August of last year. This was done in Washington, D.C. in a press conference that was supported by the U.S. Department of State, along with other embassies from around the world. RISC is the Registry Information Sharing Compact Database. It allows flag registries to share and research information on problem vessels that may be evading regulations or engaging in suspicious activities. By sharing this data, flag registries can be informed, eliminate risk, and prevent flag hopping when under investigation. According to Mr. Castellero, quote, the Registry Information Sharing Compact database marks a significant advancement in our collective efforts to maintain the integrity and security of global shipping. With this platform, we are strengthening our defenses and working together to uphold the highest standards of compliance and safety. Now, the reason I can say that the Liberian Registry is doing this is I just came back from the Liberian Registry. I flew Wednesday to the Liberian Registry to give a talk, a part of their Lisker Academy, where they bring in subject matter experts to talk about things regarding shipping. I gave a talk to them and their offices worldwide. I should note that the Liberian Registry is not in Monrovia, Liberia. It's actually outside of Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. It's been there since 1948 in the United States. The Liberian Registry is the largest registry in the world. They have 17% of the ships registered around the world. Panama comes in second at 14, Marshall Islands at 11. And it's important to note that these are open registries. These are not flags of convenience. I use the terms very carefully because lots of times people want to call registries flags of conveniences. And to be clear, back in the 60s and 70s, when there was a lot of problem with registries out there, it was bad. There were bad periods of time. Liberia was one of the ones that had a lot of issues at the time. But through a series of accidents, we've seen reforms and changes since then because of things like MARPOL, the Marine Pollution Act, which comes out of the Torrey Canyon disaster, and a variety of other issues. We've seen the registries really clean up. I should note that not only did I go up to the Liberian Registry and have given our talk, but I then sat down with the executive, the senior vice presidents and vice presidents of all their departments, and they gave me a 3-hour briefing on what they do. And I'm going to do a separate video on it. One of the topics that we talked about almost from the very beginning was how the Liberian Registry was purging itself of ships, particularly these shadow fleet, dark fleet vessels, on a common basis. I think that is important to note. It's not just Panama, it's Liberia, it's a lot of nations that are doing it. It's one of the reasons why you'll see we're seeing this flocking to these new registries that are out there. Now, there's other entities out there that are tracking this, and I think it's important to note them. My good buddy Samir Madani over at Tanker Tracker officially blacklisted tankers lists 1,202 tankers that are under sanctions either by OFAC, by UANI, by the UN, by the EU, you name it. They have all of them listed here. It is an extensive database that you can track of ships that are under sanctions. You can download it. It's being updated on a regular basis. Then you have the Lloyd's List Sea Searcher. This is a great tool. Here you see 1,638 vessels that are under some sort of sanction, from yachts to super tankers out there listed. You can track them around the world. You can see what these sanctions are. But one of my best follows, I follow, again, I am not a very bright person. I really am not. I am smart by following smart people. And one of those I follow over on LinkedIn is Michelle Weiss Bachmann. She is fantastic. Used to be over at Lloyd's List. She is now with Windward. She is an expert on this. This post from just 2 days ago on LinkedIn, very interesting development. An EU and UK sanctioned, falsely flagged, Benin-flagged Russian trading tanker appears to be deviating from the normal course of sailing through the English Channel. The tanker, the Blue, and others are using fraudulent registries that have no valid insurance or certificates of seaworthiness and safety. As a matter of fact, in the past 24 hours of this, she noted falsely flagged Aqua Alive and White Condor 1 had sailed through the channel amid some controversial statements by the Russian foreign intelligence that was foreshadowing that the UK is working with the Ukraine to deliberately orchestrate a dark fleet casualty oil spill to pressure Trump to impose secondary sanctions on Russia. That's a lot of gray zone operations right there. I will note that she has on here the link over to her blog on Windward. Most recent one is this: sanctioned, stateless, and falsely flagged tankers are testing Europe's resolve. Big issues on this. It is a big topic, and there's a lot of people looking at it. Other one I would argue is over here at Lloyd's List. This is Richard Mead. Estawatini wants to take on the fake ship registers by creating a real one. So one of these fake registries that was out there that was registering ships that was not a member of the International Maritime Organization was Eswatini. This is the old Swaziland. They had at least 7 vessels under their fake flag for a while. And matter of fact, the person behind that fake flag is now launching a new registry. This is through Laos. And he's basing it out of St. Martin, where he's registering these ships. These are registries that don't exist. It's a fake registry. Yeah, they're flying a flag, but there's no means of protecting and doing due diligence on the vessel. This is just to have a flag flying off the stern. And matter of fact, Richard had an earlier set of stories. This is back in mid-July, where he was talking about Mali, Mauritania, and Eritrea becoming the latest locations for this online maritime fraud. These issues are getting a lot of attention around the world. Unfortunately, we're not seeing it in the IMO where it needs to be. I want to come back to the end here and talk about why Panama is doing this now. So I'll take you back to the original story. This is the one that we started this off with. Panama Ship Registry will no longer accept the registration of oil tankers and bulk carriers that are more than 15 years old. Now, they're not purging ships that are older than 15 years off their books. And one of the things that we know is happening with the world fleet is it's getting older. It has grown from 19 years of age in general up to 21 years of age. So why is Panama purging 15-year-old ships from their registry? Well, we have a lot of issues that are at play here that are requiring ships to be much newer. We have obviously requirements on pollution and carbon neutrality. This is coming out from the International Maritime Organization. Again, Secretary General is Panamanian. And we just had a huge conference that's talking about escalating the push to go to zero carbon by 2050. And if you start purging 15-year-old ships out of the fleet right now, well, if you build a ship in 2025, that ship is going to be out by 2040. That means you've got to build a replacement vessel before the new regulations, the zero carbon emission, goes in effect in 2050. We know that the U.S. has targeted Chinese shipbuilding as a problem through their U.S. trade representative reports and through the proposed port fees. Matter of fact, a recent study out by Clarkson shows that just this first half of 2025, there was a massive reduction in the order book coming out of China from over 70% to just over 50%, with Korea being the huge beneficiary of this, a big spike in shipbuilding. And I got to think that there's an...
by the way, on a side note, the Australian government, knackers, with the Korean shipbuilders, I think for 4 submarines or something like that. I'm not exactly sure on the number, but the Australian government just like a couple of weeks ago signed a contract with South Korea to build them some submarines.
Issue here about trying to get more shipbuilding into China. I think China is one of the big players that operates behind the scenes here. China has a huge influence in Panama right now. There's discussions going on about the sale of ports in China. Chinese company CK Hutchinson owns a terminal on each end of the Panama Canal. There was a proposal to sell that to BlackRock and TIL and Mediterranean Shipping, but China is kind of holding off on that. And so when Panama announces that they, listen, we're purging older ships from the registry, you know, if those ships don't have any place to go, if other registries are going to start shutting them out, if there's a cleanup of these flags of convenience, you know, Eswatini, Mali, Eritrea, and the like out there, then you've got to start building new ships. And that is to the benefit of China, I would argue. China is going to benefit massively from that. Obviously being hurt by these calls to shift ship production out of China to other places.
Okay, what I hear him saying is, yeah, you know, China's going to get a lot of shipbuilding, but America is going to step up and start building a lot of ships. But that's irrelevant to the fact. What I hear him, you'll be able to buy a ship that's like 300, 400, 500 foot long, that's 16-year-old, cheaper than shit, because it won't be able to be a carrying vehicle, but it could be purchased and converted to a super yacht. And you ain't got to worry about anything till 2050. So that sounds like a good business.
There is a lot going on behind the scenes, so we've got to be really, really careful. So there are a lot of factors that are at play here. The dark fleet is obviously one of the big ones. The main ship registries, Panama, Liberia, the Marshall Islands, are cognizant of having these sanctioned vessels in their fleets. They're purging them. But again, what you see is this rise of these new registries out there. Eswatini, Mali, Mauritania, Laos. Hey, we may see a Mercogliano registry out there. So who knows? In today's episode, if you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do it? You hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon.
Or you don't do any of that shit. And I just cut him off. All right, now let me go to share screen to keep my words to knackers. Here we go. This is actually an excellent chart, and yes, it is kicking right now. You can see as of April, it's pretty much, it went from 1588 at April 19th, took a little sideways and little down action through the month of what is that, May 17th through like maybe the July 5th, and it was 2,500. And on August, it's almost doubled. It's taking a slight pullback here at the end, it looks like. This is not a good chart. But yeah, and this is 2019. It was $109. That's 6 years ago, guys. That's crypto. Buy and hold. A lot of these bigger companies, like ETH, is a platform. Other DeFi projects launch off of the Ethereum platform. It's like the Solana platform or other platforms that are out there. These other cryptos launch off of these platforms. So when you see a platform like this going up, every one of the alternate altcoins that is based off of the Ethereum platform is also going up. And that's a way that you can look and chart on a quick time which cryptos to get into and not get into by looking at the platforms that they're built off of. This platform here back in from 20, I don't know, shit, from inception till about September 2020, you know, it was pretty flat, not doing too much. It took off, let you know what it could do here at 46, almost 4,700 back in November 2021 in the last halving. So if it's only at 42 right now, it's going to pass this number right here. It's 46.99, probably by about, I don't know. So ETH has a long way to go. It's got a long way to go as to what Knacker was saying. It's a good, in my opinion, it's not, it's an opinion. Even though it has gone up like that, I don't know if I'd invest in ETH right now, but I'd look at the DeFi projects that are based off the Ethereum platform and seriously take a look at those things, because those are probably going to look pretty good. Yeah, exactly. Lots of room for tennis courts. On the, again, hey, what's up, Bullion Brett? Every 15 years, they're going to have to replace these big boats. That's a new rule of regulation. That means a new type of company has to be put out there, because you're going to have a lot of ships that have nothing to do. And the people are going to look to be selling their ships and putting that money into getting new ones so they can stay in business. That's going to put a lot of people out of business. All the same, those boats are going to be available for cheap that are older than 15 years old. They're super large and super sturdy and can be very easily converted into a super yacht at a pretty damn good price comparatively to a brand new one. And the boat retrofitted would be just like new, and the whole superstructure would be less than 15 years old. That's a relatively new in boat years. I mean, they were running boats until this new registry came up, this new regulation. They were running boats that were 60 and 70 years old. If you get a 15-year-old, 300-foot, 100-yard long hauler and convert it over to a mega yacht, that thing will be good for freaking 30 years until 2050 when you have to worry about the new rules and regulations. So just from those reports, that's what I get out of there as far as a new business starting up. And again, you'd have to have the TWIC card if you want to go to work for anyone who's got the balls enough to start up a company, start buying up these old ships and converting them. Sorry, I had to get some milk for my tea. I ran out of tea in the middle of the live stream. And just like Good Morning Stackers, you got to get the slurp in. So let's see, what else do we got here? I got some military crap because seems like everyone's busting balls trying to get tough and shit. Oh, no, I didn't do any of that. Cool. Good. I didn't feel like going to the war zone. Let's go to the weed zone. This is the Dales report. I already gave him a thumbs up. He's Trump signals possible cannabis rescheduling. This has to do with that one stock I keep talking about, MJNA. It's down to like 0. It can't go no further down, so it's only got upward action to go. It's been in business for 25 years. And this report right here will have something to do with that stock. Good possible 100x. This is not financial advice. It's not even good advice. Anytime you talk about stock market.
Latest Cannabis at 5, presented by Dutchie. I'm your host, Shad Dales. And big developments out of Washington this weekend, where President Donald Trump is finally giving the cannabis industry a fresh signal on marijuana rescheduling, telling donors it's something his administration is going to look at. This comes as pressure builds inside and outside the White House to follow through on his campaign pledge. So tonight we're going to break down exactly what was said, who was in the room, and why this may fit into Trump's broader law and order agenda. Some big developments happening this weekend. So with that, let's get right into it. Let's first begin with the setting. At $1 million a plate fundraiser at Trump's Bedminster, New Jersey club, the president was asked directly about marijuana rescheduling. His response, that's something we're going to look at. Think about that. According to CNN and the Wall Street Journal, Trulieve CEO Kim Rivers was in attendance, a notable detail given Trulieve's high-profile role in industry reform efforts. White House spokesman Abigail Jackson later reinforced that all policy and legal requirements and implications are being considered. The only interest guiding this president's policy decision is what's in the best interest of the American people. And that is a good thing if you're for cannabis reform. Now let's shift inside the West Wing, where there's not total consensus. CNN reports that some advisors are pushing for action on this campaign pledge, while others are raising what they call moral and legal concerns, warning it could backfire politically. But let's remember, this is President Donald Trump we're talking about, a president who campaigned on being for the people and isn't afraid to go against the grain when he believes the public is on his side. A public opinion on cannabis reform is overwhelmingly in favor, even among many Republicans. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles has already requested input from key agencies, and those responses, compiled by the Domestic Policy Council, are reportedly now in a report sitting on her desk. That means Trump has everything he needs to make a call, and if he wanted to, he could even move the process along through executive action or a clear directive to the DEA. In other words, disagreement inside the West Wing doesn't necessarily slow a president who's willing to use the tools of the office to deliver on a promise. Continues to show. When we look back on the campaign trail last year, Trump supported rescheduling, banking access for cannabis businesses, and even a state-level legalization measure in Florida. But since taking office for his second term, he's been publicly silent until now. And right now, industry optimism is real, and there's money behind it. So what do I mean by that? Well, new FEC filings show a marijuana industry-funded political committee donated $1 million to Trump's Mega Incorporated super PAC in the first half of this year. Trulieve chipped in $250,000 of that. The PAC also paid $120,500 to Fabrizio Lee and Associates, a Trump-connected consulting firm for legal services. It's the same firm that polled Republican voters and found most support for cannabis reform. That poll website. Earlier records show Trulieve and Curaleaf gave $1 million combined to Trump's inaugural committee after last November's election. So there's some interesting plots here. And don't forget, James Hagdorn, CEO of Scott's Miracle-Gro, says Trump has personally told him multiple times since taking office that he intends to follow through on rescheduling. That's a public statement from one of the largest ancillary companies tied to cannabis cultivation. Now let's switch our attention to the DEA and Trump's new DEA administrator, Terrence Cole, who was sworn in last month. Back in April, during his first confirmation hearing, Cole said examining the marijuana rescheduling proposal would be one of his first priorities. When his official strategic priorities list came out, rescheduling wasn't there. Instead, it focused on enforcement against Mexican cartels, fentanyl trafficking, violent crime, and the dark web. At first, some saw that as bad news, but as attorney Eric Berlin explained on Trade to Black, that list was about enforcement strategy, not the DEA's full portfolio. So what does that mean if you read between the lines? Rescheduling is a regulatory process, not an enforcement initiative. So its absence from that document could actually be a good thing, which we've outlined recently. And on top of that, you factor in former DEA Special Operations Director Derek Maltz, who laid out with us something important. Trump's brand has always been about law and order. That's how he connects with a big part of his base. Maltz pointed out that the illicit cannabis market today is a magnet for organized crime. So we're talking unlicensed grows, hidden in rural properties, massive cross-border smuggling operations, product that's been cut with unsafe chemicals, and networks tied to transnational cartels. Maltz has seen firsthand how illegal grows often go hand in hand with human trafficking, weapons offenses, and money laundering. And the profits from that black market don't just stay in cannabis, they flow into other criminal enterprises, including fentanyl distribution. So the regulated market, by contrast, it's the complete opposite. It's subject to seed to sale tracking, product testing, compliance inspections, and tax reporting, aka it's traceable. Further to that, rescheduling, Maltz argued, could make the legal industry more competitive by lowering its tax burden, opening access to banking, and encouraging investment, all of which would help licensed businesses pull demand away from the illicit market. This all makes sense.
And it might actually make MJNA go from 0.0002 up to maybe 10 cents, which is like 1,000x.
So for a president who wants to be seen as tough on crime, that's a double win. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, it would starve cartels and organized crime of cannabis revenue. Then you put that revenue into licensed businesses that create jobs, pay taxes, and operate under strict rules. It's also a messaging play. Trump could frame rescheduling not as going soft on drugs, but as modernizing policies so law enforcement can focus on violent offenders, fentanyl traffickers, and border crime. The very priorities that Terrence Cole has highlighted. Maltz called it a law and order reform. That's the kind of policy pivot that could let Trump claim he's both fulfilling a campaign promise and strengthening America's security posture. Even more, Trump's former acting DEA head has predicted the administration will dig in on the state-federal marijuana conflict, stressing the need to eliminate confusion and not create it. Meanwhile, Sean Spicer, Trump's former press secretary, he recently claimed that Trump will not legalize marijuana. But here's something important to know. Legalization and rescheduling are different conversations. And also, let's be honest, Spicer hasn't been in the administration since mid-2017 when he resigned following the hiring of Anthony Scaramucci as communications director, a move he reportedly opposed. So really, he hasn't had any direct insight into Trump's current policy process for years. So really, his credibility here, it's limited. Don't read too much into that. So with that, where does this leave us? We've got Trump saying he'll look at rescheduling. We've got industry money flowing to political allies. We've got a law and order frame that could make reform politically palatable for this White House. And at the same time, there's dissent inside the administration, and the DEA's focus remains on enforcement against more dangerous drugs. So really, if Trump moves forward, it'll likely be because rescheduling can be packaged as a crime-fighting tool, one that boosts the legal economy, drains revenue from the black market, and frees up law enforcement for higher priority threats. Let's face it, that's a narrative that could bridge his base and the broader public. It all makes sense. But if he doesn't, then the report on Susie Wild's desk may become the final resting place for this round of reform talk, though it doesn't appear that way. This seems like it's only building. So with that, we'll keep tracking every development here at the Cannabis in 5. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Lots to think about. So let's.
All right, hold on a second here. Let's take a second and take a hit for cannabis reform. Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, tomorrow I'll do a little short of my backyard. One of my plants is well over 8 foot tall. That son of a bitch is huge. And then I got another plant that bugs topped it twice before it was 2 inches tall. It was a runt, and now it's taken off. It's about 6.5 foot tall with 4 very distinct tops that'll be 5 to 6 foot long buds, about 5 or 6 inches round. It's going to be a beautiful crop this year. So what subjects do y'all wants to talk about? Or should I show? Okay, we'll go into financing and then we'll get into crowd control.
If you don't play their game, then the jackals will come in and assassinate you.
This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a fact, you know.
They have been called blood-sucking assassins.
We weren't helping the poor get better lives. We were helping the rich get richer.
There's one institution that makes leaders vanish.
The most dangerous institution you've ever voted for.
This is the nerve-wracking story of one of the most powerful forces on Earth. Not a military, not a government, but a bank. A bank with no flag, no borders, no accountability. The International Monetary Fund. What is the IMF really? Why do entire countries despise them? Why do leaders fall silent or fall altogether after they speak out?
What if your eyes could regenerate themselves?
Oh my God, what if?
The AREDS2 eye vitamin has been
Be like
considered the gold.
Icarus and Amos flying. They can make a song out
To
of it.
provide exclusive insights into this organization, we interviewed Alex Gladstein, the Chief Strategy Officer of the Human Rights Foundation. With his help, we sought for answers. Let's play a game. Do you see a pattern?
There is a new African in the world.
Kwame Nkrumah, president, revolutionary, author of Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, a man who believed
The last stage of imperialism. The same thing I believe we are fighting right now in America is to get the imperialist financial control out of our system that started corrupting our system in 1913 with the illegal Federal Reserve and income tax. But that's another story. Let's get back to this story.
Africa's chains hadn't been broken, just rebranded. He warned the world, the IMF is not here to help. It's the financial arm of empire. But Ghana's economy was crumbling. The IMF came with a rescue offer, and Nkrumah said no. 1 year later, February 1966, he boards a plane for Vietnam. While he's gone, his government falls. The military seizes power. Nkrumah, invisible.
Outside Parliament House, home of Ghanaian democracy, every trace of the dictator's statue is removed.
Within days, the new regime embraces the IMF's terms and signs the deal. And Western capital flows back in. Chile, December 1972. President Salvador Allende stands before the United Nations.
There have been efforts to isolate us from the world, strangle the economy, and paralyze the sale of copper, our main export product, and keep us from access to sources of international financing. We are the victims of a new expression of imperialism, more subtle, more sneaky,
Imperialism.
and probably effective to block the exercise of our rights as a sovereign state.
He accuses the World Bank, the IMF, and the Inter-American Development Bank. Shortly after, he nationalizes US-owned copper mines and dares to dream of an economic order built on sovereignty, not suppression. But justice doesn't come. Jets bomb the presidential palace. Allende dies with a rifle in his hands. The military...
I've seen all of my videos about the Sahel region of West Africa, where they say, your country's money is its sovereignty. And that's why this one in particular guy got killed, because he wanted sovereignty over the International Monetary Fund, which is an imperialistic system. It's all coming together.
It takes over the power, and within weeks, international credit lines reopen. Markets breathe a sigh of relief. Fast forward to January 1998, Indonesia. President Suharto, the IMF's loyal enforcer for decades, suddenly pushes back fuel subsidies. He won't cut them. Family monopolies, off limits. But resistance comes at a cost, and the cost got too high. A single image travels the world, humiliation frozen in time. It's not a negotiation, it's a performance. One man signs, the other watches. 4 months later, riots engulf the streets and Jakarta begins burning. Shortly after, Suharto resigns. For years, it all looked like coincidence, but the files were waiting. In Ghana, American officials discussed Nkrumah's removal. In Chile, they funded the opposition, orchestrated economic sabotage, kept close ties with coup plotters. In Indonesia, US pressure on Suharto came not through weapons, but through numbers, spreadsheets, and interest rates. These weren't just collapses, they were takedowns. What links these three leaders? Each challenged the economic world order, each stood in the IMF's way, and each disappeared. How can an institution with no soldiers, no flag, and no accountability bend nations to its will? Imagine you're the leader of a nation. Let's call it Imagistan. Your local elite, drunk on power and imported champagne, live in guarded compounds. Their nights, fueled by cocaine and wealth hidden in Swiss bank accounts. The people, different story. Your currency has collapsed. Inflation rages. The shelves are bare and your people are starving. You didn't start this fire, but now the house is burning and they're all looking at you. Your ministers lean in, their voices low, their advice identical. Call the 3 letters, 1,000 implications. You're told it's your only hope, but we all know when you're desperate enough, hope is dangerous. A smiling diplomat arrives, clean suit, clean shoes, and a sharp mind. He offers a rescue package, fresh capital, technical support, all delivered in a loan agreement. It feels like a salvation, and it's just one signature away. But is it really salvation? And who are they really?
Who are they?
Let's rewind. 1944. The world is still at war,
the sound of
but
us
victory
rewinding.
is coming.
At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire,
Brenton Wood.
44 allied and associate
Y'all know
countries arrived
that.
for the opening of the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference. Invited by President Roosevelt, they will work in the seclusion of this White Mountains resort.
Their mission? Currency wars spark conflict. Never again should countries fall alone.
Summing up the important
And yet all they do is start wars. How ironic.
of Bretton Woods, Mr. Vinson says,
Ours is a mission of peace, designed to establish the economic foundations of peace on the bedrock of genuine international cooperation.
The United States leads the effort, triumphant, rich, and unscathed compared to Europe. But seated at the table are men with visions far beyond victory. Frank Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau declares,
"We have come to recognize the poison of economic nationalism. This will be its end."
And the great economist John
That right there is the worst statement ever made. Bank nationalism is sovereignty because we'll control our own money, and international monetary imperialists won't control our financial system. I just wanted to set that straight.
On Maynard Keynes, he calls it nothing less than the brotherhood of man. From that dream, two institutions were born: the World Bank to rebuild bridges, cities, and physical scars, and the IMF to rebuild something even harder: trust. The IMF would stabilize currencies, prevent manipulation, and be the lender of last resort. Its promise? To help members in trouble, without shame, without punishment. A cooperative monetary system where every country, rich or poor, could lean on each other in times of need. A firewall against chaos. This was more than economics. It was idealism made flesh. And for nations scarred by war, it felt like hope written in the language of money. But history doesn't preserve dreams, only actions. Because even in 1944, the room wasn't equal. Power sat heavily on one side of the table, and while the ink was still drying, the balance of the world was already tilting. Our country, Imagistan, is not the first, and it won't be the last.
If your rocket's not launching, you're not alone. 52% of men deal with it, but
Oh
no
my
one wants to
God! We need a better fuel source.
He is just 17, shot in the face by a soldier. Not in a war zone, not in a gang fight. No, during a protest. It happens in Cochabamba, Bolivia, April 2000. His name is Victor Hugo Daza. But this isn't just about a boy killed in the street. This is the story of what led to it. An economic experiment, a foreign doctrine, and a bitter medicine prescribed by the economic doctor, the IMF. It's the late 1960s and Bolivia is politically unstable but economically booming. Tin is its treasure, oil its promise. The resources make up more than half of Bolivia's export income. Flush with petrodollars, their military dictatorship borrows like kings. Infrastructure, imports, arms, ego.
And then they sort of like addicts, they keep borrowing. No one's telling them to stop, and we're like dealers, we're happy to keep giving the debt.
But it is a house of cards, and in 1982 it collapses. Debt balloons past 100% of GDP. Then tax revenues collapse. The solution? Print more money and more until a loaf of bread requires a sack of bills. Inflation hits 11,000%. This isn't a crisis anymore, it's a coma, and a doctor is needed. In the halls of power, one name keeps echoing: International Monetary Fund. But the IMF doesn't send normal doctors, it sends reckless surgeons, not to rescue, but to perform a shock therapy. August 1985, Supreme Decree 21060, signed by President Victor Paz Estensoro, scripted by Harvard economist Jeffrey Sachs.
Harvard.
Only after Bolivia agrees to slash and burn its entire economy, the IMF opens its doors. Fuel prices triple overnight, wages are frozen, price controls abolished, and the mines, over 20,000 workers fired in one stroke. No pensions, no retraining, no future. People like Carlos are
No
left with
IMF.
nothing. A miner, now jobless. But even worse, his son was sick and needed medicine. Actual medicine, but now the clinics cost a lot of money. Carlos is excluded from public support systems. The IMF calls it economic innovation. Privatization isn't always evil. There are great, positive examples. But what happens when you sell life itself? In 1999, Semapa, Cochabamba's public water utility, is sold. The buyer? A foreign consortium called Aguas del Tunari, led by Bechtel. This wasn't just water, it was control. All sources, even community wells and rainwater, were now subject to billing. Overnight, water bills soared 100%, 200%. Some families saw 300% increases. Carlos can no longer afford water for his own teenage son, Victor. The people fight back. Students, factory workers, farmers, united under one name, Coordinadora. February 2000, they march. They block roads. They demand water be returned to the people. But the government responds with tanks. Martial law. And shortly after comes the moment that would change a country forever. On April 8th, 2000, Victor Hugo Daza is shot dead at 17 for defending water. His blood stained the pavement and the water never looked clean again. But the story didn't end in Cochabamba. Bechtel wasn't done. They sued Bolivia for $50 million. For profits they never got to steal. They filed with ICSID, the World Bank's shadow court, using a treaty loophole in the Netherlands. The country that had just buried its children was now expected to pay their killers ransom. Protests exploded in San Francisco, Spain, the Netherlands. Activists chained themselves to Bechtel's HQ. Finally, the company surrendered. They walked away with 30 cents. Bolivia was not alone. The IMF offered cures, but again and again, its surgeries and side effects were deadly.
What the IMF and World Bank really do is exploit poor countries for their labor and resources. And it's kind of like a neo-colonial mechanism.
That's a lie. It was around a long time before neocolonialism. It was called the East Indies Company. I believe it was around since 14 or 1300s. And the East Indies Company used to buy and sell countries as well.
Victor was shot. Carlos never recovered. And Bolivia was forced to sell its soul and body just to survive another day. Whose crisis is it really?
Tesla's stock is crashing. The headlines say Elon's empire is collapsing. But
oh my
what
God, we're all going to die.
If you've thought about investing and trading on the capital markets but are too scared of the risk, our free community group is the place to learn. Attached. They call it liberation, but
what you had was a system of extraction, almost like a giant vacuum machine, vacuuming up the resources of countries and stripping away the ability of governments to even tax corporations that were involved in those extractive industries.
Good sound effects.
There is a terrible irony here. While the rich world lectures the poor on the importance of preserving the environment, the IMF and the banks tell the people of the Philippines
I'm glad you know the history of them, my brother. Good on you, man. Yeah, it's a good history to know about.
Fragile earth, its minerals,
economic
and
control.
So the earth must pay the debt.
For many, it is just neo-colonialism in a three-piece suit. And at the center of this new empire, the International Monetary Fund. A debt trap starts simple. A country borrows, it struggles to repay, so it borrows more. Then comes the IMF, with rules, with conditions, and austerity. And the trap tightens.
We then find ourselves in this kind of situation where we are capital deficient. And because we're capital deficient, we then have to borrow. Not unlike the situation of like a low wage worker who is exploited and extracted, and they have no choice but to go to a payday lender, as is the case in the US. We go through these cycles of debt, and that debt, like you were saying, Eugene, is used as a mechanism of...
Now, see, also what they're not mentioning is those countries' leaders are the ones that choose to sell out to IMF. There are actually countries out there that have not sold out to the IMF. Ethiopia is one of them. They just finished the GERD Dam, and supposedly, according to Wikipedia, they got 1.3 billion from China, but it was a $5 point something billion project funded by Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is going to get all of the benefits and the rewards of all the power that's created that they send to Kenya and Tanzania. And that's going to solely benefit the Ethiopian people, and the IMF ain't got crap out of it. And that's probably why every now and then Donald Trump mentions that Egypt should attack Ethiopia and destroy the GERD River Dam, because believe it or not, IMF is big bankers. Well, Trump's knows a lot of them personally, I'm sure.
Control. It's a mechanism of subordination.
Debt becomes the new weapon, stripping away any room to maneuver.
What's up, Deplorable?
Governments must choose between servicing their loans or funding hospitals, schools, and public works. And when they default, that's when the IMF steps in with its so-called rescue package.
He decidido iniciar conversaciones con el Fondo Monetario Internacional.
But what happens when the medicine becomes the poison? Take Argentina, once among the wealthiest nations on earth. Fertile land, black gold, a thriving middle class.
Well, you got to take it to weed if you drop by, and you also have to hit the thumbs
Decades
up.
of corruption, military coups, and ideological whiplash turned promise into chaos. It's 1976, and a brutal dictatorship seizes power. Tanks on the streets, bodies in rivers. But behind the violence, something quieter. Debt. $12 billion in private sector loans, secretly transferred onto the public books. The people would pay. The elites, they walk away clean. Then comes hyperinflation and people get their money out of the country. And the humiliation of the Falklands defeat, a short but bloody conflict between Argentina and UK over the sovereignty of the Falkland Islands.
Okay, hold on. That's another misnomenclature. I do recall the 82nd Airborne went down there and jumped. And there was actually one guy, I spoke with someone who was in the same company with this dude, landed in like 10 foot of water and walked himself out of the water. And they faced very little resistance. But the 82nd Airborne was the main human body put on the Falkland Islands because England didn't have the manpower in place to be able to do so. So they talked to America, and we sent our military in as their police. England sent in a couple boats. That's about it. So it wasn't England in Argentina. It was England using America because they're the imperialists that control the purse strings of America. They did it in Korea. They did it in Vietnam.
Argentina is bleeding, but the doctor is already waiting. The IMF arrives like a savior, a lender of last resort, but also a gatekeeper. The loan comes, but so does the contract. And that contract, it would define the next 3 decades of Argentina's fate.
¿Qué lo preocupa a usted?
El país, señor. La situación. ¿Usted no?
The contract pushes what they call structural adjustment. While it comes with the promise of funding, for most people it felt more like structural punishment and a return to the old days.
We've transformed the old school imperialism with cannons and rifles or bow and arrows or what have you. We've transformed that into debt imperialism, basically.
This is Eddie's structurally adjusted neighborhood, which periodically gets bulldozed to make room for more rubbish.
Public assets end up sold, social spending gets slashed, and subsidies are erased.
Nunca más el Estado incursionando e interviniendo en áreas que no le corresponden.
All in the name of efficiency, all in the name of stability. But instead of healing, Argentina spirals. In 2001, Argentina defaults on its debt payments.
Queremos conseguir un crédito stand-by del Fondo Monetario.
Middle-class savings vanish overnight and pensions are frozen, all while poverty...
Hey, what's up, a million?
Estado de sitio en todo el territorio nacional e informado al honorable Congreso.
19 years later, in 2020, Argentina needs another restructuring, another crisis. Despite all these years, the cycle had never ended.
Nos pongamos a trabajar con el Fondo Monetario.
But in fact, the public institutions have received a total of over $1.3 trillion. The reward is to be more than 60% more in debt than they were in 1982.
As the debt remains, so does the pain.
Hace algunos minutos el Fondo Monetario anunció un programa inédito para la Argentina.
And after all this development, one question remains: who really profited?
So, what do y'all think about that there? I got a question for everybody. While we're looking at this tasty homemade bacon cheeseburger, that's thick bacon, by the way. It's not thin bacon. That's bacon you can taste. And homemade fries. How long in America's, 250, 300 years, whatever, how long have we been under a true gold standard? Let me get myself out of this picture. All right, from here it says, from 1879 to 1833, an American could exchange $1 for gold. This period was known as the true gold standard in the U.S., where paper currency was convertible to gold at a fixed rate. Specifically, the government was legally obligated to redeem any U.S. dollar for its equivalent in gold. This fixed rate was established at $20.67 per ounce. All righty then. So, let's see, what else do we have going on here? I'm going to bring some points to y'all. So, for that, about 50 years. Let's see. Let's go for this one here. And let's see if you guys got a good view of it. Yeah, you got a good view of it. This one here says, okay, the question was, were we on a gold standard from 1933 to 1971? The answer, no. From 1933 to 1971, Americans could not turn in dollars for gold. In 1933, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt prohibited U.S. citizens from exchanging paper money for gold, effectively ending a domestic gold standards, while other countries could still redeem dollars for gold at a fixed rate after World War II. This conveniently was terminated in 1971, officially ending the gold standard. Okie dokie then. Now let's go to this next little bitty bit of history. All right, let's see. Yes, the United States was on a gold standard for a significant period before 1933. I already explained the dates, 1879 to 1933, according to the Federal Reserve history, although a bimetallic standard, gold and silver, existed earlier. Coinage Act of 1873 effectively established gold as a standard by demonetizing silver. What? Effectively established a gold standard by demonetizing silver. This meant the dollar was convertible to gold at a fixed price. The government maintained the gold reserve banks. Maintained the gold reserves to back the currency. So, let's see. Although a bimetallic standard gold existed earlier, The Coinage Act of 1873 effectively established a gold standard by demonetizing silver. Let's get this right here. Although a bimetallic standard gold-silver existed earlier, the Coinage Act of 1873 effectively established a gold standard by demonetizing. So I guess, according to this, silver is not a monetary metal after the Coinage Act of 1873. What y'all got to say about that? Nana, nana, boo, boo, stick your head and do, do. Hey. Knackers, thank you very much, my friend. Yes, I will give you the answers. I can't wait to give the answers. That's why I don't give you time. I don't put out polls because I can't wait for them to come in. I get too excited to give the answers away. Yeah, well, history is what runs the future when it comes to economic policy, because they go by different, unless they want to try experimental new shit. And even if they do try experimental new shit, they still use old models, historical economic models. And like, say, for example, digital economy. Well, I could very easily see where the Phoenician bead economic principle would come into play. Because for a couple of this, as a matter of fact, let me go ahead and Google this. When was the let's see if I got this right here. Okay, I found it. It was quick. It was real quick. Okay, during the glass blowing years, when we first discovered the technology of glass blowing, the French came up with it. And they were the only ones that made glass, so they made these little Phoenician beads. And as you can see, what's highlighted, it says, while these beads were certainly valuable trade item and likely held symbolic or adornment purposes, African Direct notes that trade beads in Africa were also used as a form of currency. Now let's go down. Some archaeological findings, such as the Phoenician glass eye bead fragment found in Mali, which is the Sahel region of West Africa, indicate the reach and importance of this bead trade, suggesting very early connections between the Mediterranean and sub-Saharan Africa. However, it is important to note that Phoenicians did not adopt and use coinage the later periods of their history. Oh, well, Phoenician beads, that's talking about Phoenician people. So there we go. So if it, let's see, silver, okay. Yeah, true that. Yeah, I need to get something on that to show you. I forgot about that question, sorry. I already forgot about it again. What was the question? Dutch East Indies Army. How big was the Dutch East Indies? All right, we got some facts coming your way. Let me go ahead and share some screenage here. And it says, let me get my little fat bacon cheeseburger and fries out of the way. The Dutch East Indies Army, known as the Koninklijke Netherlands Indische KNIL, yeah, I butchered the fuck out of that name, had a fluctuating size throughout its history, but in 1941, it consisted of around 35,000 regular troops. Okay, this is a private company. And then down here just tells you, where they came from and whatnot. No big deal. But 35,000 regular troops for a private company. Holy shit. That's what you call a national threat. And that's probably why they got rid of them, because I could see where America would be like, excuse me? Move your ass. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to end this stream. I appreciate you guys being here this evening. I hope you have a great rest of your evening and have a better tomorrow. Yes, Snackers. That apparently in 1941 they did. Yeah, for the imperialists. They made so much money for the imperialists. Same ones that control us. Our financial system. And that's how they could pay for that shit. 1941, they already had the Federal Reserve and income tax paying for the Federal Reserve, which gave them trillions of dollars a year. Right now, we're paying an extra $420 billion a year in interest rates that we don't have to. And they're going to them. So in 2 years, they make like an extra $1 trillion of free money off of us. That's why we should end imperialistic financial control over America. Anyhow, having said that, I'm going to go and let you guys have a great evening. I hope you have a great evening. And I hope you like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you're kind, helpful, and grateful. And I hope that you have a very, very blessed weekend. God bless everyone here. Always give all glory to God at all times. Good night.